Hey everybody, welcome to Culinary Characters Unlocked. I'm David Page. On this episode, the winner of the 2024 James Beard Award as Best Chef in the Mountain Region, Matt Vawter, who's cooking impeccably sourced ingredients at his Rootstalk restaurant in his hometown of Breckenridge, Colorado. Chef, how you doing?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm great. Congratulations on your James Beard Award.
Thanks very much. Appreciate it.
I'm going to steal a line from an article written about you, which said, "How did a kid who grew up ski racing on summits, slopes with a love for football make it happen?" Okay, how did it happen?
My first experience in restaurants was my mom had gotten laid off, and my stepdad said, "Hey, you're 14, get to work, help us out." Turns out restaurants are kind of one of the few places that'll hire a 14-year-old. So I started as a busboy at a little diner-esque restaurant here in Summit County, and I think I just kind of fell in love with the teamwork. I'd always been excited by food. Traveled a bit with my grandparents. There was some exposure there to restaurants, meeting chefs and things like that. My grandmother would take me back in the kitchen after dining experiences. So I think I always had an interest in it. And then when I finally got into a real restaurant, I fell in love with that teamwork. There happened to be a gentleman there that thought it would be a good idea to give a 14-year-old a chance cooking on the line. And I did. Started as a breakfast cook.
You must have shown something exceptional to be put on the line at 14.
I think he saw my interest, and basically what was happening is I'd hang out in the kitchen after my shift was over, and it didn't take long before someone said, "Hey, if you're going to be back here, you better do something." And so I started with just prepping potatoes. It was a breakfast restaurant, so we had to prep gallons and gallons of potatoes daily. And so that's how it really started. And then I think he saw that and said, "Hey, do you want a shot at cooking?" And I said, "Yeah, let's give it a go." And I was on the grill station making pancakes and flipping hash browns and things like that. Fell in love with the energy in kitchens, the teamwork aspect that everyone had to have a successful shift to make the service work, but knew pretty quickly that I didn't want to flip eggs and make pancakes for the rest of my life. So I went to my dad, my stepdad, and said, "Hey, you're friends with the guy at the Ranch," which is a restaurant here in Keystone, and got me an opportunity to do a stage there. And for some reason, that gentleman also thought it was a good idea to give a 15-year-old a shot in his fine dining restaurant. So I was on the salad station, prefixed tasty menu. Everyone that came in the restaurant received the same salad, and I spent about a year on that station making the same salad for 100 guests.
People don't realize at the basic level how potentially boring and repetitive professional kitchen work can be. You have to work your way up. How'd you put up with that?
He really challenged me he said, every salad has to look exactly the same, taste exactly the same, and that's consistency. And I bought into his idea there. And, I was a 15-year-old kid, so everything that was happening around me was new and fresh, and it was just fun, and just rolled with it. And I think it's Thomas Keller that said in one of his interviews at some point, like, line cooks need to embrace the monotony, and that's how you achieve consistency. And I think I always subscribe to that, and we still preach that in the kitchen often because it is monotonous, and you do the same thing over and over and over again. But finding that challenge within yourself to at least make it the same or as good, but hopefully trying to make it better every day.
Why do I have to throw out my first pancake every time? What am I doing wrong?
Griddle's probably not hot enough, or you went straight from mixing and didn't give everything a chance to kind of come together.
You mix it, then you let it sit.
5 minutes.
Butter or oil on the grill?
I'm a butter guy, personally.
So you're a teenager, you've been given an opportunity to cook for real. There was a culinary program involved, a school? How'd that happen?
Yeah, so Keystone Resort, which actually it just ended after probably 30 years of being a culinary program. It was called Colorado Mountain Culinary Institute, and it was through our local community college up here, Colorado Mountain College. But basically kind of modeled the French style apprenticeship, or closely models the Greenbrier idea in West Virginia.
Which is?
They have a whole resort with all these outlets of food and beverage And you can take these students, transfer them around over the course of 3 years as employees of these kitchens. And there's that exposure level. And then 1 day a week or 2 days a week, you're going to your formal education, your labs, whether that's stocks and sauces and into baking and pastry, and getting the exposure necessary in the classroom to then hopefully put that to work when you're in the outlets. The great thing about that program when it was in its heyday, you had a conference center, so you got exposure if you worked there into banquets, several hotels on the property, so you're seeing how hotel kitchens work with large functions, restaurants on property, as well as room service and things like that. And then there were 3 fine dining outlets on property as well. And the idea was that these apprentices would transfer every 6 months to a different outlet and graduate after 3 years with all of this exposure and the ability to hopefully step into a position, whether that's with the resort or somewhere else, with actual experience rather than just a degree in culinary arts.
So this is classical, i.e. based on French, or did it cover other cuisines?
We had some introduction to other cuisines, some separate classes. I think the term back then was international cuisine. At the heart of what was taught, classical French, European technique.
Well, you did say earlier you're a butter guy.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Since you obviously had a desire to cook, what did culinary school give you that you didn't have going in?
Well, I think that specific program led really well to my strengths. I think a traditional culinary program where I would have been on a campus going to class 5-6 days a week, I probably would have lasted 6 months. Just not really my jam. I think the fact that we were working in the industry, that's what I was better at. The knowledge that came from the classes, I think, just rounded everything out. And then the ability to, this is how you make veal stock, and these are the derivatives of veal stock, and this is where we go. And then going into the restaurants and seeing that put into use and actually producing those things, that gave me the experience, I guess.
Well, there's school and then there's real life.
Exactly. Culinary school is good for the knowledge. I mean, you're not going to, you have to be a driven individual to go find all of those things that you're being taught in culinary school. But the experience side, that's only going to be learned in a kitchen actually doing it. And that's what that program offered for me. I was already working at Keystone from sophomore year. The director of the program came and talked to me my junior year and said, hey, you're already doing this. You're getting the work credit. Well, what do you say we talk to the high school, see if we can work this out, and you can figure out how to do your 1 day a week of classes since you're already doing the full-time work. And I was able to do my senior year of high school and my first year of the culinary program in tandem.
So what happened when you graduated?
I accepted a job with the resort. I think I accepted a tournade position at one of the restaurants. Lead cook, I guess is what you'd probably call it today. Accepted that position and quickly realized that maybe I had been in Keystone long enough and needed to do something else. And one of my mentors, who's remained a really good friend, he was the one that told me, hey, you should get out of Keystone. Go see some different stuff. Get some outside influence. This is the only place you've cooked. You've been here for, at that point, I guess, 5-6 years, and you need to see what else is out there. So I moved over to Breckenridge, which isn't very far away. It's about 10 miles away, and took a job at a new restaurant. It was called The Cellar, and the chef there had come off of a recent experience at Charlie Trotter's. He was the one that I think kind of opened my eyes to, oh, there's all this different stuff out here.
Different stuff like what?
He was the first person that I saw doing vegetable purees, first person that I saw changing the menu with the seasons and really paying attention to the seasonality. Keystone was great, taught me a great foundation, but there was moments, we were just doing what we were told, but looking back on it, it's like we were serving asparagus in the middle of December on top of a mountain. He was the guy here in Breckenridge is the first one that was like, you don't serve asparagus until the spring and then it's done. So kind of opened my eyes to some of those things. Spent a couple of years with him, and then he ended up leaving and going down to Telluride. And I found myself in this position where I was kind of in charge of the kitchen at 21, 22 years old. I had a good work ethic, had some experience, cared a lot about what I was doing, and got promoted. And I think young cooks are always quick to take that promotion and want that title. And I was no different. Took the title. Quickly came to the conclusion that I didn't really know everything I needed to know about cooking, let alone how to teach people, how to manage people. and started to look for a different opportunity. My girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, was ready to move to Denver to go back to school, and we took the leap and moved to Denver. That same guy that told me to get out of Keystone told me that there was this new hot restaurant in Denver called Fruition, and I should go interview there.
So you did.
So I did. This is the only place I interviewed and staged. That was a really cool experience walking into Fruition. Coming from the mountains, I think, and specifically Keystone, is very old school, wearing knickerchiefs under your chef coat and tall toques and things like that. And I get down to Fruition and the cooks are all in t-shirts and the place is a little run down. Alex would say the same thing. It wasn't the nicest.
Alex Seidel, the executive and owner, I guess.
Chef owner, yep. Got in there, was a little taken back by all that, but immediately was like, these guys are cooking some really good food. And there's a group of people here that are all focused the same way I'd like to think I'm focused. And that was tough being from the mountains. I was kind of one or two, maybe three people in a kitchen that were really focused and everyone else was kind of just working a job. And when I got to Fruition, it's like, these are all young culinarians that are really focused on their careers and they want to become great chefs. And I accepted a job there.
How did that develop you?
Those were the years I developed into a chef. I think my time at Keystone and in Breckenridge, I developed into a cook. When I got to Fruition, that's when I started to develop into something more than just a cook.
What does that mean? I mean, do you suddenly get instincts for stuff, or is it watching other people's technique and copying it? How did this turn you into a chef?
I think his mentorship, how to lead people, how to train, teach, motivate, inspire, and then just more experience around a different level of food, cuisine, and service, and just the attention to detail. Those were the things he was always preaching. And then I think as a chef and as a cook, really started to develop my style. And I think a lot of that came from when Alex purchased and started Fruition Farms. He purchased a farm, I think it was in 2009, rundown place about an hour south of the city. And his dream was to make sheep's milk cheese.
By the way, very few people have that specific dream.
I agree. Yeah. It was cool to be part of it. It all stemmed from he used to say it never made sense that chefs in Colorado have this amazing lamb, and then you're seeing people put goat cheese on these lamb dishes. Where's the connection? So, and then if you look deeper, there's not a lot of sheep's milk cheese in the United States, period. We quickly found out why that is. They don't produce as much milk. They're expensive. It's a challenging venture. But one of the sous chefs from the restaurant partnered up with him, became the cheesemaker, and obviously Alex was down there a lot, bought a flock of sheep and built a milking parlor, built a cheesemake room, built an aging room, and started making cheese. And that's how Fruition Farms started. I think what was really special in that time is, as cooks, we were doing 4 days at the restaurant, 1 day on the farm. And each year that farm grew into something different. Started with the cheese, then it was a greenhouse. We started growing microgreens. Then it was a hoop house. We started putting things in the ground. And it got to a point where we were producing, during our short growing season in Colorado, we were producing 80 to 90% of what we were using in the restaurant from a produce perspective at the farm. And the cooks were responsible for going down there and doing it. And I think that sculpted my kind of philosophy, I guess, on just understanding that there's a lot of work that goes into that aspect of it. And it's our job in the kitchen to really highlight that and respect it and take care of those products.
There are going to be many people who have heard enough about fresh and local.
Sure. Yeah, and I agree.
Why does it make a difference?
I think flavor's king in cooking.
And it really makes a difference if the tomatoes come from down the road, or the squash or whatever?
I don't think that's 100% true. I think there's farming techniques, and I think there's people that do it the right way. But I think that's the beauty of what we get to do is those three farmers bring their tomatoes, and you kind of get to pick which one tastes the best, and that's what you put on the plate. But having that understanding of, one, how much work goes into those products, and then two, where your food's coming from, gives you a different respect when you're making the plate. But I agree. I think farm to table, like all food comes from a farm.
Ends up on a table.
It's not a new concept by any means. And I certainly don't preach that about our restaurants, and that's what we're doing. I think it's just the right thing to do. And it's what brings me happiness when we're in the restaurants. So
you have this experience under the chef who becomes your mentor.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually you decide to move on and open a place of your own? What led to that?
So I had worked my way up to chef de cuisine, exec sous, whatever at Fruition, and had spent a healthy chunk of time there. Probably at that point was about 6 years. And I went to Alex and I said, "Hey, I think it might be time for me to find my next thing." And that's when we decided to partner together and open Mercantile Dining and Provision.
Which was?
Mercantile Dining and Provision was, or still is, in Union Station, downtown Denver. It was part of the revitalization of that whole area. Within that was, I think, 5 different restaurant spaces in the station. So it became this hangout, this new hub of the city. And we were one of the restaurants that initially opened there. That was my first chance to be involved on an ownership level. It was the chef de cuisine, chef of the kitchen, and massively different concept than Fruition. As far as Fruition was 50 seats in a neighborhood, dinner only, Mercantile, breakfast, lunch, dinner, 5,000 square feet. I think we had 120 seats, just cranking all the time. And that was the job. That was the time period that I really probably found the confidence to eventually do my own thing.
So when did you go and do your own thing?
That was, Mercantile was about 6.5 years old at that point. COVID hit. I think every restaurant in the world had to pivot, do something different, as we did ourselves. Shifted the models, laid off staff, did everything that every restaurant had to do, and maneuvered the best we could through that time. And I think I just looked at what was important. And my wife and I actually came up here with our kids to Breckenridge and had just a little 3-day trip. And I looked at my wife and I said, "Hey, what about maybe coming back to the mountains?" And started to develop the idea and kind of stumbled upon the space where Rootstalk is today. And it was an old friend of mine that owned it and was operating a little breakfast lunch restaurant out of there. Gave him a call and started the conversation and started to develop the concept. Chatted with Alex and my other partner Dan and said, "Hey guys, I think I'm going to chase this opportunity." And decided to open a restaurant in the middle of COVID.
Many people would say that was not smart. Other more plain-spoken people would say, "What, are you out of your mind?"
Yeah, I had some of that. Probably had some of those feelings myself. But I think looking back on it, it was a blessing in disguise. It gave us an opportunity to really grow into the space, figure out the challenges and how to address them at a volume that was manageable with the constraints of whether it be capacity restrictions and number of families, whatever it may have been. Right at the beginning, so I purchased the business on October 7th, I think, of 2020. We did a 2-month remodel. We were pretty much ready to open December 1st. And at the time, restaurants were closed. You weren't allowed to sit inside. But the word was that on the 18th of December, we were going to be able to apply for this 5-star rating and get open at a 25% capacity. So we operated through that first winter at 25%. And I believe it was in May or something like that. We were able to go back to full capacity. But in that time period between December 18th and whenever the restrictions lifted, the most we did was 85 covers in an evening. And it allowed us to really take our time and dial everything in and really be focused, which you don't get in a restaurant opening very often. I feel like most times it's kind of full bore and go as hard as you can. And you make a lot of mistakes through that.
What was your vision for the place?
I think it was probably Alex that said it to me a long time ago. Space really dictates the concept. When I walked into Rootstock, or it was called Doma at the time, but when I walked in there, it's this charming Victorian home built in the 1880s. And I think that's really where the concept started to develop, was just moving people to the home. I was mindful of coming back to Breckenridge and realizing that it's a ski town. People are on vacation. And then there's also a community here of 4,500 people that live in Breckenridge proper full-time. And then there's the county, which has about 30,000 residents. And I wanted to create something that was approachable, honest, and just about really good food and genuine hospitality. Win the local community over with our flavors and our technique, and hopefully create a place for tourists and visitors to gather and enjoy while they're on vacation.
Who is your core clientele? Is it locals or is it visitors?
I think it's both. We're certainly a tourism-based economy, so we have a lot of visitors. people coming in to ski, and then the summer business is hiking, biking, and just being in the mountains. So we see two distinct seasons. Really, it's kind of Christmas through mid-April, depending on where Easter falls. And then again, July 1st through the end of September. Those are our visitation times. But like I said, there's 4,500 people that live here full time. And it was really important to me that we created a restaurant that the locals felt ownership in and were proud of and happy to come to and see what we're doing.
What's the motivation? What's the driving ethos behind your menu? Is it seasonal? You say there's really only 2 seasons in Colorado.
We change between 9 and 11 times a year, and that's really dictated by what's available. We have a short growing season as far as the plethora of ingredients, but we have access to a lot of things. So yes, trying to be as seasonal as possible. It becomes challenging because it snows here in May sometimes, and when you have a bunch of green food that's very light and focused on the spring season, and then it snows a foot, you walk in and that isn't necessarily what you want to eat when it's snowing outside. So we have some challenges there that we work through, but really just working with as many people, both on the Denver side of things, Boulder, the eastern slope, and then the western slope of the state. But we're at 9,600 feet, kind of in the center of the state, in the mountains. So not a lot is growing hyper locally. But we have access to a lot of things around the state.
Such as?
One of the farms I work with really closely, Esoterra Culinary Garden, they're down in Boulder area. He's pretty much 4 seasons at this point, though in the middle of the winter, it's pretty limited to greens and a couple of roots and things like that.
What are you doing? Give me some examples of what you're doing with this relatively local produce.
I mean, it's constantly changing. We just rolled out a little small menu change yesterday. So our beef dish, we kind of played to the flavors of like Italian beef with pickled vegetables, and we're using beef tongue. On the cold side of things, tomatoes, roasted eggplant puree, and sesame.
What are, in your mind, some of your signature dishes? The stuff you're the proudest of, whatever time of year.
Well, I think if you asked our guests, they would probably say the French onion soup that we initially opened with. Though I struggle, are we going to bring it back? Or are we going to not do it this year? Just because I think our cooks, want to see new and innovative things. But I would say if there's one dish, it's probably that. The several different riffs we've done on cassoulet have fallen in that same vein. And I think it probably has to do with that first initial menu and what we rolled out and how we've kind of brought some of those things back. So those would probably be the 2 that stick out as the most signature.
We're being told to eat more vegetables and less animal flesh.
Sure.
Does your menu reflect that? Do your plates reflect that?
I think so. I mean, we treat vegetables with the same integrity, if not more at times, than we do meat. But I think the reality is we're in this environment and we have to write a menu that's going to appeal to the guests, the people that are walking up and reading the menu on the street. So we sneak those vegetable preparations in as a integral part of the dish and focus on those, but it might be with duck or it might be with dry aged beef.
Where do you get your duck?
Duck's coming from New York right now.
It's hard to get duck, isn't it?
Yeah, I think COVID, we had a little challenge getting some duck, but I think that's coming back now. Same with Colorado lamb. That was a challenge for a couple of years.
And I see on the menu your New York strip comes from Colorado.
Yep, we have 2 different, one on the tasting menu that is a good friend and former chef down in Denver, Justin Brunson. He started a dry age program 6-8 months ago, and that's only featured on the tasting menu. And then Fitch Ranch is what we're using on the a la carte menu.
I'm not a big fan of tasting menus generally. Now, I've had a great tasting meal at Alinea. I've had a great tasting meal at Guy Savoy in Vegas. But generally speaking, a tasting menu makes me feel like I got cheated, like it was a bite of everything. Why should I order your tasting menu?
Well, it's definitely not a bite of everything, one. And I think it's a fun way to, and I've had similar experiences that you're speaking to where,
11 Madison Park, before they turned vegetarian, disappointed the hell out of me.
Oh, really?
Yeah. What makes yours good? What makes yours, what do you get for it?
$139.
Okay.
We're trying to be in an affordable price in comparison to tasting menus around the country. I realize that $139 is not cheap. I think it's a great way to see what we're doing and what's seasonal, what's fresh. And I kind of call it a snapshot of what's happening in Colorado today. And I think we're very mindful of the size piece. We're in a tourism environment, and I never want someone to walk out of the restaurant and like, oh, that was good, but I'm still hungry and I have to go get a hamburger afterwards. That's not the experience I want anybody leaving with. So I think from a value perspective, one, we're super conscious of it, and I think it is a lot of food. Hopefully not too much food. There's a fine balance there between just completely destroying people and leaving them hungry. But I think really it's just the different preparations and techniques throughout the entire experience that you get to be part of, rather than there's nothing wrong with an a la carte menu. But the reality is, I think size wise, you're going to order an appetizer and an entree and then maybe share a dessert. And that's 3 dishes that you get to experience as opposed to 7, 8, 9, 11.
What are the techniques that your kitchen is phenomenal at?
Phenomenal is a strong word. I think our braises in the winter are special. I think that's something we spend a lot of time on. I think our vegetable techniques and how we choose to highlight the vegetables that we get in-house, depending on the season, are special, and we spend a lot of time on those things.
Do you still cook?
Absolutely. When we're done with this, I'll be putting on a chef coat and head down to the restaurant.
What are you making tonight? Is there a special?
I'm going to be in the back kitchen working with the garde manger and the amuse station and the pastry station. So I'll just probably be plating a lot tonight and working with our younger cooks.
How hard is it these days to get motivated, high-quality, up-and-coming cooks who will become chefs?
COVID changed our industry for hopefully what's the short term. I think, like I said earlier, I think every restaurant had to make some sort of move, whatever they made. And I don't think there's a right or wrong. I think we were all pivoting the best way we knew how in that moment in time. And I think people took a hard look at, just as I did in coming back here and opening a restaurant, they took a hard look at what was important. And I think the people that maybe had that realization that this wasn't going to be their career path and they weren't lifers in the business, I think they left. There's the shortage. There's several culinary schools around the country that closed during that time. The field of really high quality experienced cooks has diminished, though I'm excited about the younger generation that's coming into the business right now. They show a lot of promise, but I think it's going to take us some time to get back to that place we were.
Any concerns that this newest generation of would-be chefs is motivated less by a deep passion to please people by cooking than by a desire to be famous and have a TV show?
I think in my small circle of cooks that I work with, which is a pretty large number of them at this point between the 2 restaurants, I don't see that as a motivating reason. I think that there is a passion there for making people happy with food, and it's what they know and what they are passionate about learning. But I know what you're speaking to, and I think I have mixed feelings on that whole piece, because I think on one side, the cooking shows and the bear and all these things, it's attracting more people to our industry, whether that's the general public and just being interested in what's going on, or if that's someone that sees it and wants to get into the industry because of that. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. On the other side, I think that that's kind of a false sense of what the reality is. At the end of the day, especially as a young line cook, it's a very blue collar job. You're getting buckets of soap and water and scrubbing for an hour or 2, sometimes at the end of the night. It's hot, it's hard, expectations are high, and it can become intense, and they're challenging environments. So.
Well, the industry has gone through a reckoning with respect to yelling and screaming and abuse and misogyny in the kitchen. Did you see that on the way up?
Certainly, I think that things have evolved for the better in the restaurant business, and I think that's restaurant business wide. I don't think that that's just isolated to the kitchen. I think that we are evolving with this next generation of employees and really to be better motivators, to be better people that inspire the people underneath us. And it's the right way to handle things.
Did you have a personal awakening? Did you look up one day and say, I don't like what I'm doing. I don't like the way things are going on around me?
I think it goes back to that restaurant that I was at in Breckenridge when I was, 21, 22. I didn't have the skills to manage. I didn't have the skills to teach people how to cook. I was frustrated with myself, and I leaned on other things I had seen and what was maybe more acceptable when I was coming up in the business. And I think that was the moment when I realized, like, I still need to learn more, and I need to go work for someone that knows more. So that would probably be my moment. And there hasn't been a moment since then, though. I think we've evolved, and I think great managers are able to manage individuals and understand what motivates and inspires each individual, not with a management style, I guess.
Your own restaurant. Rootstock is, by definition, an American restaurant.
Yeah, I think New American or Contemporary American would be the best way to categorize.
Do you have Italian background in your family?
According to the 23andMe, there's a little bit, but no, not really.
So why'd you open an Italian restaurant after Rootstock, which stays open? You have two restaurants now. Why'd you open, what is it, Radicato?
Radicato. Mm-hmm. Translates to deeply rooted. Less the vegetable or tree side of things, more to do with like community and time and place. It's always been a piece of my cuisine. It's always been something I'm passionate about. When I've been fortunate enough to travel to Italy, I found a lot of inspiration. I saw a void in the community and an opportunity where I think we could bring something else to the community that would enhance it. Like I said, it's always been a part of my cuisine as far as, a component here, a dish there, technique over here, but gave us an opportunity to really lean into it. And I think the reason really that Radicato exists is my two now partners that were just employees when we opened Rootstock. They were instrumental in getting things off the ground. My chef de cuisine, Cameron, and my service director, Patrick. Without those two guys, I don't think that Rootstock would have experienced the first year and a half of success that we did. And they worked their tails off. And it was an opportunity with opening that second restaurant to make them partners and create an opportunity for them to be a bigger part in what was going on.
What regions of Italy inspire the menu here?
We didn't want to confine ourselves to one specific region. So we've always said Italy as a whole, but I would say mostly Northern Italy is kind of where we find the most inspiration.
That's right. You said you were a butter guy.
Yeah.
There's Italian American and then there's Italian, two completely different but perfectly legit cuisines. What are you doing here?
I would say that we're inspired by Italian, but with Colorado ingredients. We're in the place we are. So the tagline on that restaurant is Mountain Italian. The first kind of concept there was pasta. We really wanted to lean into pasta.
You make your own?
We do 6 different pastas on the menu. Sometimes it's 5 in a risotto, but most of the time it's 6 pastas, both extruded and rolled and filled. So that was kind of the initial, like, this is where we want to start.
Did you have any experience making pasta, or did you just figure, I did this, I can do that?
Yeah. No, we made a lot of pasta at Mercantile, Fruition. Before we opened Radicato, there was a pretty extensive pasta section on the menu at Rootstock. Didn't make sense to have that once we opened Radicato. So that's, slimmed over the years.
Why fresh made pasta? I mean, most Italians eat dried pasta from the box.
Sure. Well, I think when you talk about like filled pastas, ravioli, agnolotti, like they're just superior when they're fresh made. As far as the extruded, I think it's a texture, mouthfeel, how it cooks, how it holds onto the sauce, like all of those things. And I think it's just, there's an art there that is special, and that's where we choose to spend our time.
Sauce absorption, you mentioned a minute ago.
Mm-hmm.
That's really important, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
When you make pasta at home, when you're done with the pasta, should it go into the sauce?
Depends on what we're making at home. But if I'm making my kids pasta and red sauce, I reserve some of the pasta water that we cooked it in.
Put their starch in the pasta water.
Exactly. And build the sauce, and then I would add the rigatoni or the spaghetti, whatever I'm making for them, and bring that all together on the stovetop until it's the correct consistency, and not too tight, but definitely not too loose, and it should be homogeneous, in my opinion.
It's your restaurant?
Yeah.
I noticed grilled quail. Is that Italian?
Again, I think that's one of those things we're utilizing ingredients that we have access to with inspiration. But yeah, I've had quail in Italy before. So
gotcha. I don't see any wild boar. Does that cycle through every now and then?
Not a lot of access to it.
Okay, where do you get your branzino?
Branzino's coming from a guy down in Florida by way of the Mediterranean, but He's a fish provider that we've used for years, and it's all drop ship.
Is it tougher in the middle of the country to get ingredients that are not intrinsic to that area?
I think that these days with planes and FedEx, it's relatively easy to access. Whether or not it's cost effective, different story.
I have been told that rising prices are killing some restaurants and certainly hurting others. I've read that fine dining is in trouble. Your view on all of that?
Costs are increasing, and restaurants are a challenging business to begin with when costs are good. It's a complicated equation. The reality is that food costs more than it did 4 or 5 years ago. For most people, rents are up. Labor is certainly up in most places. I'm not super familiar with other states and how they're operating, but I read, and it sounds like labor is a challenge.
Do you have a higher tipped minimum wage in Colorado than other places or not?
Yes, not the highest, but definitely not the lowest. It's like 11.36 or 11.42, I think, is the tipped minimum wage if you choose to take the tip credit, and that's the state. Denver has its own thing that they voted on a few years back. That's become more of a challenge. I'm very conscious and think about the gap between the front of the house staff and the kitchen staff, kind of going back to what you were saying about attracting a new talent to the kitchen. I think that we all have to figure that equation out, and you're seeing a lot of different things happening. Denver, I think, is a good market to look at right now. Everyone is challenged by the labor cost and finding new ways, whether that's service included, whether that's, full house tip wage and not taking the tip credit. Lots of different things happening down there, or just, doing what has been the standard.
This is a hell of a tough way to make a living. Why do you do it?
I love it.
What is it that you love? Is it the making a dish? Is it the making someone happy? Is it the camaraderie of the staff? Is it your desire to live on the knife edge of poverty? What?
I think it's all of those things, but I think at the end of the day, it's creating an environment to see young people become successful, learn a craft, and then hopefully go out and do their own thing someday and become successful themselves. When I'm interviewing people these days, I think for a very long period of time in my career, the focus was the plate of food and seeing the guests enjoy that, and all of the pieces that were necessary to get to that point was what really motivated me. I think at this point in my career, it's really seeing the success of the people that work for us and seeing them grow, seeing them develop the skill set and the understanding of the business. That's what brings me the most joy at this point in time.
Given the financial challenges and our changing tastes in food, what do you see for the future of dining in America?
Ooh,
Are we all going to eat Impossible burgers?
I hope not. I really hope not. I think when you talk about the state of the food system in America, it's a big, complicated question where we try to make our impact in our little circle with 2 restaurants. And certainly as a consumer myself, I want to eat real food that's sourced appropriately. Certainly that's what we want to put on the plate. We talk about the choices in our restaurant not only impacting our guests, but our employees that are sitting around tasting food all day long, working stations. Like, it's important that we're putting the best food in their bodies and feeding them the best food possible. So I think that's what's important to me as far as what's happening in our country. As costs increase, I think people have to find different ways to make the equation work. That's challenging. I think that different people take different takes on that. For me, our kind of ethos and philosophy in food is the most important thing, and we're going to stick by that as we go forward. And I've always kind of taken the stance that, we're going to charge appropriately for that so that we can do what we need to do as a business. I hope, knock on wood, that I'm never in a position where I have to kind of change that equation in order to make it all work, because that's the part of the business that makes me happy. So
You're up to 2 restaurants now.
Mm-hmm.
Further expansion plans?
Nothing on the horizon. There was one other thing that we kind of didn't get to.
Oh, go ahead.
And I think it has to do with the employee piece and kind of restaurants and the equation. I think the other side of the young people coming into our business and the realities behind it, I think, has to do with having the things available that large corporations already have in place, whether that's retirement plans, certainly health insurance covered at some portion for each employee. And in my opinion, that basic need. And that's something we put into place relatively quickly after opening Rootstock that's super important to me. We're preaching career, we're preaching staying in privately owned restaurants, but you can't do that unless you have those things available. That's another thing that I'm super proud of is the 401k piece and having young people starting to plan for their future, because the reality is none of us want to work forever, and there has to be a plan in place there. And then certainly health insurance and the ability to find healthcare should be easy enough to find through your employer. So those are two things I'm really proud of. And I think when you talked about the evolution of restaurants, whether it be the things that have happened in the past and how we've evolved past that, I think this falls in that same vein as things that weren't necessarily available when I got into this business, and really proud of that.
Well, you should be. Congratulations again on the James Beard Award.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And thank you for joining me here today. It's been an absolute pleasure getting to know you.
Absolutely.
Chef Matt Vawter on Culinary Characters Unlocked. I'm David Page, and I'll see you next time.